Welcome to the Health Science Podcast. I'm Dr. Frank Sabatino, the host, sponsored by the National Health Association. Today, my special guest is Chuck Carroll. Chuck has a very interesting background in radio broadcasting and journalism in his own right, but he's also the host of one of the really most profound podcasts out there, The Exam Room, sponsored by the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. This podcast has reached 130 countries affected and promoted the health journeys of millions of people. And I'm impressed that he's had such incredible guests from every walk of life, entertainers, actors, professional athletes, Olympic athletes, and luminaries in the medical field, including doctors Michael Greger, Dean Ornish, Neil Barnard, Colin Campbell. So I'm just so pleased and happy to welcome you to the podcast, Chuck. Welcome to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association, the oldest organization in the world championing the extraordinary benefits of a whole plant food diet and healthy lifestyle, as well as water-only fasting. We believe that health results from healthful living and focus on evidence-based science that promotes the health of you and your loved ones, as well as the health of all animals and the environment. We feature experts from a cross-section of disciplines within the plant nutrition, vegan, psychological, environmental, and animal compassion sectors. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, the NHA's Director of Health Education.
Oh, thank you so very much for the invitation, man. I'm really happy to be here.
You know, we've never met. It's interesting, though I know Neil Barnard for decades, and so I've been connected with and been influenced by that beautiful, iconic organization for many, many years. And I guess my first question is, how did you get the gig?
It's a funny thing. When I was still hosting a sports talk show with an NFL player here in Washington, they came to us and they said, well, look, we understand that neither one of you guys are plant-based, but we know of Chuck's weight loss story, and we need a pro athlete for this campaign we're doing called Teaming Up for Health. And so we wound up doing this campaign. They took a bunch of pictures of us, with fruits and vegetables in the kitchen. And that was my introduction to the Physicians Committee. And little did I know that, 4 years later or so, I'd be hosting a show for them. But that was the introduction. And I mean, the wealth of knowledge that I've gained over the course of time just working with them it's mind-blowing to me.
Well, the beautiful thing about what they do and what he does and what you do is that, it's very important to me to really establish that evidence base for a lot of what we're trying to teach, because there's a lot of anecdote, there's a lot of opinion. You go online, there's so many different opinions. The truth is, we're trying to cut through that and really get to the basis, the real scientific basis for the beauty of what we do. But saying that, your story is and your journey to recovery is one of the most inspirational stories I've seen in all the year. And I've been doing plant-based living for close to 45 years. Understand that as a plant-based physician myself. So it's one of the most inspirational stories that I've seen. And especially when you're dealing with the weight loss story, because as you know, and I know, there's so much frustration in people that go on that roller coaster of fad approaches when they have weight problems. And your story has really highlighted that. We have a dieting industry that's close to a $65 billion industry with a 95% failure rate. So if you think about the frustration that's kind of built into this, and I just saw something today that really kind of blew my mind, that the American Academy of Pediatrics is recommending weight loss surgery as the most safe and effective treatment for weight loss for teens and preteens. So can you imagine a child or a young teenager, seeing that as their only recourse? So I was very impressed by the fact that I know that as a last resort, you ended up going into weight loss surgery, but you emphasized that was really only a very small part of your success. And it wasn't until you embraced that plant-based approach and that plant-exclusive approach that it really took you to that next level. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I don't think that I would have been able to sustain long-term success had I not gravitated toward a plant-exclusive diet. I mean, there's really no question about it. But to your point, that the surgery is now being recommended for, teens and adolescents, that to me is really kind of crazy, because you're talking about what is largely an irreversible procedure being conducted at a time when the body is still growing. And I even though the standard childhood diet right now is not the healthiest, for me, food addiction was a real issue. But it really only got ultra intense when I got into my 20s. So my hope would be that there would be less invasive ways to get some behavior corrections in a younger child, so that they wouldn't have to go to such an extreme route.
Yeah, I mean, you're setting up conditions of the inability to absorb nutrients. You're setting up so many things in a person that has not even achieved halfway to maturity. And I agree with you. It's unconscionable, really. It truly is.
Yeah, and there's no way that we could study what the long-term effect would be on somebody who had the procedure at such a young age. I don't think that data is out there just yet.
It's not. The fact that the Pediatric Association would actually say that this is a safe and effective approach in that age range without the data to address the safety issues, as you just mentioned, is pretty wild and bizarre to me, frankly.
Yeah, and I have to be, even as an adult, I have to be careful to make sure that I'm getting, everything that I need, because there are things like iron that no matter what, I'm not going to be able to absorb like a normal person is able to. That said, what a lot of people also don't realize is that over time, your body is super adaptive and it learns to absorb way more nutrients than it did initially following the procedure. I mean, that's just kind of the way that the body works. I mean, it's quite fascinating.
But the wisdom of the body is amazing. It truly is, in terms of its adaptability. Absolutely.
It's insane to me. And I love the science behind it so much. That's why I love my job. I love coming on here and talking to you, who likes to nerd out as much as I do about this stuff.
That's the truth.
But yeah,
let me address that though, because when you went into plant-based, and I know one of the things that people have difficulty with when they come through those kinds of surgeries is that they do have problems with motility and, dumping and craving and problems with absorption. So how did you wind up dealing with that in the early stages of that process for you?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I guess I kind of got lucky because, I had family members who had also had the procedure, and I was very well aware of dumping syndrome. And I saw my father legitimately turn green in the face. I mean, he looked like a cartoon character, and I was like, yeah, I don't want to go through that. So food addiction was a huge issue, but the thing that I will credit the most to the surgery is giving me that 3 to 6 month window where I couldn't physically tolerate those types of foods that I had been eating that would have triggered that dumping syndrome. And so it forced me to go through that detox that I was unable to successfully complete without the surgery earlier in life, though I had tried time and time and time again. And so I just kind of made up my mind on the other side of that, at least when it came to fast food, I was never, ever, ever, ever going to go through the drive-through again. And so that's kind of what my mindset was right out of the gate. That said, there were still some times when I would eat some foods that I probably shouldn't have, not necessarily as devious as Taco Bell, but you're talking about things like tortilla chips, a couple of fried things from Chinese restaurants, even, something as simple as a granola bar that has, a ton of added sugar to it, that can trigger a pretty wicked dumping syndrome. So you just kind of learn by trial and error over time what your body can tolerate and what it can't. But 13 years.
But the resolve to take off 280 pounds over time is it's unreal. I mean, it's something that it's just truly an inspiration because, you know how difficult in that mindset for people that have been dealing with those issues for so long. And I do want to touch on the addiction part because this is something that's so prevalent in the culture, addiction in general, but food addiction is kind of unique because you don't have to shoot heroin, but you've got to eat 2 to 3 times a day. So you've got to deal with that monkey meal in and meal out. And so it's interesting to me, one of the hallmark signs of addiction or two of them, are denial and isolation. So you tend to deny the negative consequences because you're watching yourself and you know something's not right. You know that you're putting yourself in the potential jeopardy for possibly heart disease or diabetes, but yet you're still eating those foods and creating that negative consequence. And then you're really kind of isolating to do it. I mean, you could be eating down the block under the covers in the car away from. So part of healing that addiction is dealing with those factors of isolation and denial. So you made the choice to eat plant foods, but I want to get into a little bit of the mindset of how you dealt with the underlying addictive components that obviously you have been dealing with over a period of time.
Yeah, well, I'll walk you through the story that kind of sums up my addiction with food as best as I possibly can. And that is, at one time when I was first starting my broadcast career, I was working at a radio station in Washington, D.C., whose call letters were WBIG. I can't make this up. Big 100.3. And I'm still well overweight at this point. And they come to me and they say, well, Chuck, we want you to endorse something called the cookie diet. We will pay you to eat cookies and to lose weight. And I'm like, oh my God, the answer to my prayers, like, let's do this thing. And the thing with the cookie diet is you eat a cookie for breakfast and you drink a lot of water with it. And then you eat a cookie for lunch and you drink a lot of water with that as well. And that's supposed to keep you full until dinner. And then they just said, well, eat a sensible dinner. Make sure that some vegetables are on your plate. Didn't say much beyond that, and the cookies tasted like garbage, but nonetheless, I'm being paid to do this. I wanted to be a good guy. Day one, I make it through on sheer enthusiasm. Day two, the cravings start to come in, right? And I start to get a little bit cranky, but I'm still pretty motivated. But day three, the switch got flipped, and we're talking about a total Jekyll and Hyde situation here where you could have just said, hey, Chuck, good morning. It's great to see you. The sky is just a gorgeous shade of blue today. And I would have said, get out of my face this instant or pay the price. I was so angry. I was so irritable because all I could think about was Taco Bell. Taco Bell was my everything. I did not miss an opportunity to go there every single day, sometimes twice a day. I was on a first name basis with them, and I would eat over 4,000 calories worth of food every single time I was there. And it was a standing order. And so I had gone now 72 hours without that. And by the time I got off of work, I'm in a full-blown rage and I'm starting to feel sick. And eventually I couldn't take it anymore. So I pop up out of my bed and I punch my fist through a wall thinking that's going to calm me down. Of course it doesn't. So what do? I punch my fist through a door because I haven't had Taco Bell that day. And so I devised a plan to sneak out in the middle of the night, load up on my $20 worth of Taco Bell and come home and eat it. Nobody would be any the wiser. I would just work out an extra hour or two at the gym to burn it off the next day. That's exactly what I did. But when I took that first bite of that 7-layer burrito that night that I had snuck out, that clandestine mission, it was like instantaneously all of that anger, that rage, that sickness, it faded away. And it was like a warm blanket had just been wrapped around me and life was suddenly very good again. And that was the moment that I realized I have a real problem here.
Well, you were satisfying the reward deficiency, like jacking that brain reward cascade with those foods. And especially when they're super palatable, loaded with sugar, salt, oils, you're triggering all of that dopamine response in the brain, which is so much a part of the addictive process. I want to get a little bit more into that. We're going to take a few moments, though, right now, just for a little announcement for our sponsor, the National Health Association. So we'll be right back. And now, to put a smile on the sponsors of the National Health Association, you're listening to the Health Science Podcast Show. I want to remind you to visit the National Health Association website, where you'll find incredible resources to support your healthy lifestyle, including plant-exclusive eating without added salt, oil, and sugar. Simply go to healthscience.org or nationalhealthassociation.org. Be sure to check out membership, which is $35 per year for those living within the U.S. and $55 for those living outside the U.S. You'll be amazed at all the information and benefits you'll receive. As a member, you're kept up to date on the latest evidence-based tools for health promotion. You'll receive the incomparable quarterly magazine Health Science, a beautiful 40-page advertising-free publication mailed to your home or offices, loaded with articles, recipes, inspirational stories, and interviews with world leaders in the fields of personal health, plant-based nutrition, water-only fasting, animal rights, and environmental support. And you'll receive details about life-changing events, such as the 2023 NHA Conference set for June 23 to the 25th, 2023 in Cleveland, Ohio, which will be the NHA's 75th annual NHA Conference. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and now back to the show. I'm here with Chuck Carroll, and we're going over his incredible story of weight loss and overcoming his own food addictions on the path to losing 280 pounds and becoming kind of a plant-based activist in the process, which is really remarkable, which I love. I love the story. You know, it's interesting because I'm very intrigued, because when you look at people with weight issues, losing any weight, but losing that kind of weight, there is so much emotional attachment to food. There's so much of other qualities attached to that, even on an emotional and spiritual component, where sometimes the need for outside support comes into play to help resolve some of that. It sounds like you were really kind of a warrior that did a lot on your own, but was there a vehicle of support for you? Was there some kind of community connection or any kind of meetings or anything like that that you pursued to deal with these other components?
Initially, there was a group that I had to go to. It was kind of required after the surgery, where everybody who had it within the last 3 months, they have to get together once a week on Wednesdays and talk about their feelings. The problem, though, with that was, and this is why I kind of started marching to the beat of my own drum, was that I started to notice, like, the purpose of those meetings for the attendees became, how can I sneak the foods that I used to eat back into my diet as quickly as possible? And I will never forget the day. I mean, it was like right in a row. We had somebody ask, well, can I drink carbonated beverages again? And the nutritionist who was there was like, absolutely, you can, as soon as you can tolerate them. Lady pulls a big old bottle of Sprite out of her purse. Another woman was like, well, I've been really missing sweets. Can I, when do you think I might be able to tolerate sugar? And the answer was much the same. The only way to find out is if you eat a little bit and see, what happens. The lady pulls a big old bag of Swedish fish out of her purse. And then, down the line, it came, well, when can I eat a hamburger? When can I eat pizza? When can I eat this? When can I eat that? But and so I'm like, why? Again, I'm not even plant-based at that point, but I'm thinking, like, why would you want to eat the same stuff that brought you here in the first place? And then
I could actually answer that, because in many ways, food is the symptom. The problem, the disease, is addiction. And that's really kind of a very intriguing piece, because, see, you have a very clear mindset. But if you think about it, a lot of that behavior is mindless. Think about how unconscious that behavior is, because a lot of people are so disconnected from the triggers that drive that food use. So, for example, I grew up in an Italian household. From the first breath I took, any stress, you dealt with food. You had a problem, eat something, it's going to be fine. So that mentality, gets so entrenched in terms of your own neurological system, your nervous system, your brain. So that's why the work is beyond just the food choices. And that's why I'm so interested in your process, because you've accomplished something that very few people are able to really do. I want to ask you another question, because this lifestyle has other components to it. So, for example, when you look at the addiction situation, they always bring up the idea that, yes, there's a biochemical, nutritional, there's all of these pieces, but one of the pieces is breaking down that self-centeredness, that isolation of addiction, and it brings into play what we could consider a spiritual component. Now, this is not a religious thing for me. It's not even a religious thing in the field of addiction. Spirituality, in this definition, would be, how do I see myself in outside of my own vested self-interest? How do I see myself in relationship to the world around me, to other creatures, to the environment, to whatever? Since that's built in to eating in more of a plant-based manner, did any of that kind of mindset play into your recovery and success as you became more and more plant-based?
Absolutely. Because having been in media my entire professional career, I'm kind of used to having eyeballs on me. And what I really enjoy though is kind of being an inspiration for others and giving them that hope. And so especially as I started to do the exam room and that show started to take off, like there's an enormous responsibility that comes with that to make sure that you stay on the straight and narrow. So you're not just feeding people a line of BS, right? You want to
walk the talk. You got to walk the talk. There's no
1,000%, because people can see right through that 99% of the time. And it's so important to me that I do that, because when I answer these private emails and messages from people, who are just pouring their heart out, thinking that they could never do this, I'm like, you really can. And here's how you do get through it. So you're talking about the spirituality component. That's just it. Like, I want to be that beacon of hope for somebody so that they then can become a beacon of hope for somebody else, because we are in an enormous jam when it comes to our health right now, as you very well know. And there are a lot of people out there that need some help.
Chuck, before we go on, why don't you let people know how they can get in touch with you or find you? Give us some kind of information, because we're going to put some of that in the show notes anyway, but let them know a website or any information how they could follow you and find you.
Yeah, easiest way to get me is just to shoot me a message on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. Across the board, it's Chuck Carroll with 2 R's and 2 L's, WLC. And send me a message there. I would love to talk to you. By all means, hit me up, because I've been where you are. And even if you're feeling hopeless, I guarantee you your situation is anything but hopeless. We can get you through.
And I always felt that this way of living, this plant-based approach, is just that. It provides a biology of hope. And I love that phrase when I saw that, because it's so much of what happens when you embrace this way of life. It's amazing what can recover, what can change. With that in mind, in terms of your inspirational work and how you counsel people, talk about your Food for Life program. I know there's something that you do called Food for Life. Can you discuss that a little bit for people?
Yeah, Food for Life is it's a really kind of a fun program. We actually now have instructors across the country. And what we do basically is go in and teach people the fundamentals of plant-based eating and how they can use that to improve their health. And we have a bunch of different courses now, some that are specific to fighting cancer, some that are specific to heart disease, some that are specific to diabetes, some that are just the 101s of plant-based eating. But no matter what it is, I think that once you teach somebody these fundamentals of how they can adopt a plant-based diet for themselves and what healthy eating actually looks like, not what you've read in a blog, not what you've seen on a magazine, not the pop culture thing that you've seen on TV, but what it truly means to eat a healthy diet, you can start applying those principles to your life and start whipping up things in the kitchen that are quite tasty. And man, as you know, if you're eating tasty food, that makes this whole thing so much easier, because you actually look forward to taking your medicine. And when they say food is medicine, it very, very, very much is.
Yeah. And again, what happens with that, as you do that more and more, your tastes even change. It's funny, because people think that when they're coming from eating those really super palatable processed foods, when they first make the transition, yes, things will have a different taste, because they're so used to being jazzed up. Their brains are so used to being jazzed up by that stimulation of the corporate interest that's trying to sell those things. But as you back away from that and you start getting into some simple detox, some simple embracing of the plant-based foods, it's amazing how all of a sudden a piece of romaine lettuce will be sweet and it'll be tasty. And you're kind of like blowing your mind with, oh my God, this stuff is amazing. And I tell people, no one picks a mango from a tree and worries about how they're going to steam it or saute it. In those natural states, it's the most fit food for man. So we have that natural inclination. So this Food for Life program, you do it online, you do it with recipes, with cooking demos, with all kinds of things in that regard. Is that how it works?
Absolutely. We have online classes and we have in-person classes. So you just need to go to pcrm.org, search Food for Life. And you'll see an opportunity there to punch in where it is that you live, and you'll get a whole list of instructors that are in your area. I don't have Food for Life monopolized one little bit. I will say that we have hundreds of instructors now who are doing great, just incredible work.
It takes a village. You know that. It takes a village.
100%, my friend. No question about it.
Absolutely. And people need to, it's funny, and because even what's your take on the incorporation of a lot of these faux foods, and how do you see that playing into people's ability to stay on track and come into the fold? You know, the cheeses and the artificial meats. And I mean, these are not ideal foods by any means. And they do have their own problems because they can be loaded with salt and oil and all of this. But at the same token, you know, nobody likes deprivation. So, you know, you're coming in a transition. So how do you approach people that want to transition into those kinds of foods? Do you have some sensitivity or support for that? Or how do you deal with that? How do you look at that?
Yeah, I guess it kind of depends on what their goals are, right? So if their goal is to lose 100 pounds, I'm not going to tell them to go out there and get some of those vegan cheeses because they're still loaded with oil. So they're loaded with fat, they're loaded with sodium. It's not going to help them accomplish what it is that they want to do. That said, you're right. Deprivation is kind of a recipe for disaster in itself. So what I do then is, introduce them to the idea of nutritional yeast, but I don't sugarcoat it. As you said, initially, it's not going to taste the same as what it is that they're used to, but over time, they will get used to it. Like I have this recipe for cheesy chickpeas that is nothing but aminos, liquid aminos, and nutritional yeast and chickpeas, man. And just 3 simple ingredients. You put those things together and it's like, holy crap, this is like the greatest thing ever. You put it on top of a baked potato, some broccoli. Like, yeah, exactly. So if you're a fan of cheese and broccoli, you've been eating that your entire life, I'm telling you, try this. It'll knock your socks off.
This will take you there. So it's cool. Yeah, I get that. And that's what I'm saying. Because of all the years of counseling people, I have yet to find anybody who loves deprivation. If I keep telling you not to do something, there's a part of your brain that in some way almost wants to keep doing it. So what you're doing is so powerful because it gives people an option and that's why, the use of herbs and spices in this kind of food prep is so important too, because it takes the place of certain tastes and it can really enhance their ability to stay on track. And that's very cool. In terms of your own path, your own dance, how much did other lifestyle factors come into play for you? Physical activity, stress management, things of that nature on your path. How did that play for you?
I'm still working on the stress management part, man. We're trying to change the world.
Trust me,
There's
all are.
Pressure. Yeah, man.
Yeah, but you seem like a pretty resilient guy. So I think you've got a lot of that in your court for sure because of what you've accomplished. But so what other pieces became important for you in terms of your dance on your path?
Just making sure that I'm up and moving around. And I'm not talking about going to the gym every day. Like, as a matter of fact, when I would go on those diets before, that was one of the first things I did was to go out and to get that gym membership. But over time, I would stop going. And of course, I keep paying that gym membership and I'm, flushing money down the toilet. So I just wanted to rethink things on this journey. And all I did was I started to go out for a walk. Initially, I could barely walk across the street, but that's where I started. And then I found that I could get around the block and then 2 and then a mile. That was a big day when I found out I could walk a mile again. But eventually it got up to the point where I was just walking 5 miles a day, every day on my lunch break, rain, shine, didn't matter. I was out there getting those steps. Because the beauty of that for me became the fact that after work, I didn't have to force myself to go to the gym when I was already maybe physically tired, mentally drained. It wasn't a slog at that point. I had already gotten in my steps. I was feeling good about things. And that just became a part of my routine. And that kind of remains a big part of my routine is, just making sure you get up and you move every hour, making sure that you take that dog for a little bit of an extra walk. I'm not one of those guys that went plant-based and suddenly became an ultra marathoner. In all honesty, I have zero interest in doing that, but God bless you. If that's your goal, I'll support you. I'll have you on the show. We'll make a big deal out of it. I think it's fantastic. Just not for me. And so be honest with yourself. If you don't want to be an ultra marathoner, you don't even want to run a half a marathon. That's cool. Just get out there and make sure that you're walking. Anybody can walk. Anybody can get up and walk up and down the stairs, provided that they're able to at that point. Every so often, just to get in the routine of making.
Yeah, I saw a piece by one of the docs from the World Health Organization that basically said that when you look at people today compared to 30 years plus ago, we're using about 600 calories less a day in the simple activities of living. If you think about the fact that it only takes 3,500 calories to add another pound of fat, just getting movement, as you're making a point, is very significant. So park the car further away, take a few extra steps, take the stairs, and those things I think are important. You don't need to be a super athlete, but we are an animal that's built to move, to run and jump and climb. And so doing those things does have value, does promote a sense of longevity. And in terms of your own stress in your day, I know you're a busy guy, you got a lot on your plate. So when those things happen, do you do anything for that for you? Are you involved in any form of meditation or breathing or yoga? Do you do any kind of thing of that nature?
You know what I do? I just kind of like shut the door and I just kind of stare at the ceiling and I do a little bit of thinking. It's not quite meditation, it's just deep
We
thought.
call that personal qigong. That's what that is, because you're taking that moment of just mindful quiet, your own quiet space.
Absolutely.
And that's another piece too for people, because they don't need to get involved in these formal stress management things, but sometimes you do need to take a few moments where you kind of step back from the chatter of your life so that you can just kind of regroup and kind of have that quiet moment. I raised 5 children. So at one point we had 5 kids and 15 animals in the house.
That's stress.
And my only quiet was, hiding in the closet with the dog scratching at the door with kids running. It's amazing. You just need to take that little bit of time to do that. Let me ask you one other major piece. We know at this stage that the things you're doing and teaching have a huge impact on improving people's personal health. Your podcast is remarkable. It's creating that evidence base. It's connected with one of the great iconic institutions that have been doing this for several decades. But we are at a time where our personal choices need to be looked at within the fabric of their impact on something a lot bigger than ourselves. And of course, that relates to the impact on the environment. It relates to the impact on things going on around us. So how do you, in your own mind, in the work that you do, in the counseling that you do, is that an issue for you? Are you someone who wants to highlight that bigger picture of the fact that when you're breaking from eating, animal-based foods, the industries of food production related to that, and the importance of that for improving climate, the environment, is that something that plays for you in your day-to-day work, or is it something that you focus more on the food issues and that may come up and it may not, but you don't really hammer that?
Definitely focus more on the food issues. That said, I think it's impossible for anybody to even explore this way of eating, this lifestyle, without also entertaining the environmental and animal welfare aspects of it. It's, there's so much overlap there that no matter why it is that you started to eat a plant-based diet, inevitably you get jazzed up about all of the benefits that come with it. So throughout the course of the year, I'll do a few episodes on the environment. I'll do a few episodes with animal welfare, and the Physicians Committee does some amazing work on both fronts.
Yeah, I know they do incredible work.
Yeah, and so to have that thought process, like if nothing else, I get the biggest thrill out of making sure that I'm eating as healthy as possible, but there's also like a big part of me that is so satisfied because, there is not that detrimental side effect of animal slaughter or greenhouse gas emissions that comes with eating that standard American diet.
Well, the beautiful part of the compassion and empathy that's part of kind of intricate to this whole way of thinking is really such an important piece. I mean, if you look at even just violence alone in terms of animal devastation and so on, even in the criminal justice system, there's something called the link, where they have now found that, abuse in relationship, abuse to animals feeds into abusive relationships, feeds into child abuse, so the mentality of violence and abuse that can be pervasive in a culture can be modified by embracing these ways of thinking and eating and living that bring in those components of compassion and empathy and those kinds of pieces. So it's one of those beautiful bonuses of kind of embracing this way of living and thinking. Has this work and your own experience changed or made you more empathetic to dealing with people with morbid obesity and problems of weight? How has that played into how you view those people and how you work with those people? Because some people would be very judgmental, would be very, reactive, but you've had a certain experience. So how did that play into your vision and your mindset with people of dealing with those problems?
Yeah, I think that that's the great benefit is having gone through that journey and being able to connect with them on such a deep and profound level, knowing pretty much exactly where their head is at. I have nothing but empathy for anybody who's continuing to fight that fight, and I know how hard it can be to lick that demon. And honestly, the funny thing of it is when I'm talking to people, I also say, look, I still get cravings from time to time, and I'm 13 years into my weight loss journey, 6 years into my plant-based journey, and still to this day, those foods will creep up every once in a while in my brain and say, hey, now's a good time to eat me. And I'm like, hey, no, it's not. And so I don't. But it can be exceedingly difficult. And yeah, I mean, there's nothing but compassion there. And I think that is a big part of what can help somebody also get over that hurdle is if they are working with somebody who they feel understands them and knows exactly where their head is at. That can be very, very, very beneficial. As we said earlier, I kind of went my own way when I saw that it was a slippery slope doing that particular community that I was a part of for a little bit of time. But I would love to think that we are building a much healthier community over here that can help somebody who is struggling mightily with their weight be able to finally conquer those demons.
And when you talk about those demons, you made a great point. The fact is, even with addiction, many people feel you don't necessarily have to lose all cravings to be successful. They can come and they will come and go, and you don't have to surrender and be controlled by them, by that part of the brain that's basically sending signals that you need this to survive. As you heal, as you recover, cravings will come and go, and it's not something that has to rule and take over your life. What's your one of the final questions? What's your take on this entire evolution and movement now, where people have been shamed with weight issues for so long that now they want to embrace their weight and fatness in the face of so much data that we know is putting them at such tremendous risk?
Ooh, you're trying to get me in trouble.
I mean, it's a legitimate conversation because
it is.
I'm very straight with it in my own work. I'm telling people, look, I would never body shame you. I have the greatest empathy and compassion for you, but you are at risk, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it.
Yeah, and so that's honestly that's kind of the way that I view it as well. It's a horrible analogy here, but you can't have your cake and eat it too. You just can't. And nobody deserves to be made to feel less than. Everybody is 100% equal. I don't care if you're 500 pounds or you're 150 pounds. You are exactly on the same level with everybody else in this world. That said, nobody in this world can honestly say that the person who is 500 pounds is as healthy as the person who is 150 pounds and eating a much healthier diet. It's just not possible. And while, it's great to be proud of who you are, and you should be, that pride isn't going to prevent you from having a heart attack or developing diabetes or, stop you from going to an early grave. The fact of the matter is, you can be loud and proud, but you're still going to be loud and proud 6 feet under because you didn't take control of your health. So it is a real slippery slope. I think overall self-positivity is a very positive thing. That's something we should all be very, very, very excited about, being proud of who we are. But I think part of being proud of who you are is trying to be the best and healthiest version of yourself and not to sugarcoat what is actually happening to you. Just because you hope at 500 pounds you're a healthy individual, that hope, I'm sorry, that's all it is. The hope is not reality. So embrace that reality, but be proud that you also have the power within you to rise above whatever your food demon is and conquer it. And then become proud of all of the achievement that you've made to improve your health and then inspire others. So you want to talk about body positivity, and to me, that's the biggest positive of all, is knowing that you have the power to transform that body into an ultra powerful, healthy vehicle. That's the coolest thing.
And knowing that you can do that by just staying on a plant exclusive diet is a real incredible source of power. Before we break, do you have any final words or advice you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, it's that, listen, I don't care how you lose the weight, to be honest with you, but the only way, the best way to keep the weight off long term, to avoid going on that yo-yo diet, is to eat a plant-exclusive diet. There's no question about it. For so many reasons: caloric density, nutrient density, lower in fat, higher in fiber. It's just the ultimate solution in my eyes to maintaining weight loss. I can virtually guarantee you that I would not still be 140 pounds had I not begun to eat this way. And I think that even though there's you kind of have to make your own diet to work for you, as long as you're operating in that whole food, plant-based parameter, I mean, it's kind of a can't lose situation. Everybody wants that magical thing, and this is the closest thing that we have to it. So believe in yourself, give this thing a try, and I promise you're going to love the results.
Well, I want to thank you so much today. We've been speaking with Chuck Carroll. I want to thank you for your words of wisdom and the time that you've given us today. I encourage everybody to seek out Chuck. Look at the Exam Room podcast, which is amazing. And the liner notes the show notes will have the website and information. He can be found on Instagram. I encourage you to seek him out, to find him, follow some of that information, because it will really transform your life. And I truly want to thank the listeners out there, because without you, none of this would be possible. I can't do what I do. And on behalf of the National Health Association, I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and I really look forward to seeing you on the next podcast. You've been listening to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association. Thank you for joining us today and for your commitment to evidence-based health science that backs a whole food, plant-exclusive lifestyle and contributes to the well-being of all people, animals, and our environment. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino. Be sure to leave a rating and a review, and we'll see you on the next show.